All right. I think I see Paul and Lorene there. Howdy ho. Most of you remember in the old hymnal, we had a song called "Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord," or the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And in that song, there is a series of words that describe the return of the Lord. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. And there are many more words that follow in that song that have a description of the situation at the return of Christ and that great glory that shall be present at that time. And so I ask you the question now as a question to provoke your thoughts. Has the glory of the Lord been revealed to you? In this study, I would like to, number one, look at the glory of the Lord in the physical universe. Number two, I would like to look at the glory of his very presence. And thirdly, I would like to look at his intentions to glorify humans. We see the glory of the Lord in the creation itself. Every aspect of the physical world displays his glory, doesn't it? If you go out in your backyard in the middle of summertime or in a park and you look down into the blades of grass and you spread them apart and you look down at the natural earth in between those blades, and you were able to continue to magnify with a powerful microscope, what you would find is so awesome. And what you would find are life forms and bacteria and all manner of microscopic life. The cells of the plants themselves in the root systems. And as you would go more and more magnification, then you would begin to see molecular structure and atomic structure and subatomic and all the rest into the realm that they have not yet been fully able to examine. This is the most glorious part of our world, the microscopic world. And as scientists continue to delve into the depths of the microscopic world, subatomic world, they continue to reveal new understanding and new knowledge of the things that have been made. So what an awesome and wonderful thing to think that the construction of that world was made with such wisdom, that was made in such a way that to discover all of its workings is past finding out. We are unable to thoroughly and completely exhaust the things that are too small to see. We cannot really break them apart into their simplest form and discover completely what the basic building blocks of the material world are. And I know scientists have speculated that if you get down far enough, it's just pure energy. But what does that mean? We don't know what that means. And so then we look up into the skies and we see the vast stretches of space. And again, we come into the same situation, don't we? We send out space probes as far as we can, and they send back these awesome photographs of other galaxies, of nebula, of supernova, and all the rest. And we try to analyze and we try to decipher all the information We try to assemble a picture of what the material universe, what caused its beginnings, and what happens. We end up with a mystery. And so scientists are continuing to try to figure these things out. And yet when you look at certain verses throughout scriptures, more than one place, I'll just point you to one. I'm not going to go there, but at the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 8, he says, and though a man try to discover the work of God, he will not be able to find it out. And I just love that. I love it because it succinctly states that regardless of our efforts, we'll never overturn every stone, and we will never have complete mathematical comprehension of the material world or chemical comprehension, or we will never really thoroughly discover what God has done in the making of this physical world. Let's go over to Psalm 33 in verse 6. And let's just read this. A little bit of a description of the creation itself. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Wow, by the breath of his mouth. Is this someone who speaks things into existence? He gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the depth in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. Do you really think? I want to ask you this question. We study God's Word. We pray to our personal Father. And we try to keep a connection with that relationship going. But do you really think for a moment that we have any idea at all what manner of being this is? No, but we talk about God all the time. We come to Bible study and we come to church and we have discussions. And I guarantee you, we do not know what manner of being this is. We only read things like this and try to imagine it. But when you realize the vast stretches of space, how many light years, hundreds and thousands of light years are between galaxies, and how massive space is, our sun being a yellow dwarf compared to these red giants out here, all these things being spoken into existence, and all the little microscopic things in your lawn that exist in an ecosystem that replicates itself. Cells replicate themselves. We spoke that into existence. We do not know the manner of being that did these things. We only see through a glass of window. We have a very limited understanding. But he says that he gives us enough understanding that we can love him. So that's the other side of the coin. He does give us enough. He reveals enough of himself. Let's go over to Romans 1 in verse 19. Now, this is an area of, this is an expression that shows when we as humans deny the existence of God, that actually down deep inside, we know better. I'm in Romans 1:19. It says, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. The things that might be made known of God, it is shown to them. But God has showed it to them for the invisible things of him. Invisible things. from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that he made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they, the human, is without an excuse. That's a pretty interesting expression. What's being said here? That because of the physical universe and the glory that is in it, the magnificence that we see in the construction of the universe is enough of revealing God. You are without an excuse. There's no excuse to say, well, we can't prove that. We don't really know. And so we're agnostic. No, that's not what this says. It says he's revealed enough of himself that deniers are without an excuse. That's interesting, isn't it? Because we used to, for years and years, I know we would say, well, the person's not called. It's not their fault. They're not in agreement with God because they're not called. Well, is that what this says? I don't know what your opinion is on that. But my opinion is this is pretty clear. The creation itself reveals that he exists. When people say he does not exist, it's because they're rejecting the glory that he put in place in the physical realm, in this universe. So that's something to think about. There's a lot to be said for people who are, you could say, ignorant of the Word. And there are people who have not had the Word exposed to them. I know we always, in years past, said, well, what about the Aborigine? And what about the Pygmy? And what about the people who were cut off from civilization and they grew up in a culture that didn't know anything about the Word? Well, yeah, they may not know about the God of Israel or the God of the Bible, but they can look at the universe and they know somebody did this. That's what Romans 1 is saying, that they have to acknowledge, if they're honest with themselves, somebody did this. The glory of what we see here, even if it's just in your little in a jungle area someplace where there's frogs and snakes and trees and what have you. There's no excuse because the glory is too magnificent. Makes it too obvious. So the universe itself is one of the greatest, I would say, it's one of the greatest tools for evangelism. It's one of the undeniable realities that show us the existence of God, because the glory of it is so great in every regard. Now and that's not talking about electrical, chemical, and all the rest of the specific parts of creation that are phenomenon that are just mysterious to us. Let's go over to the book of Job now, and we'll look at a few things that Job said about creation and the glory that's in it. Let's look at Job 26. Job 26, and we're going to look at starting in verse 7. He says here, and he stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. You think about what they see in the space station when they're orbiting the earth and they're looking at this blue-white marble in space, and it's just circling our sun and spinning on its axis, and it looks as though it just hangs on nothing. Of course, in the ancient world, they couldn't know that, could they? But yet here, God reveals in the writings of Job, of this book of Job, It's as if it hangs on nothing. He binds up the water in his thick clouds, and yet all that water up there, the clouds are not broken under it. He covers the face of his throne, and he spreads his cloud over it. He drew a circle on the horizon of the face of the waters at the boundary of light and darkness. So he's really going through a description of how the earth was constructed and how it appears in the marvels that are in it. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. He stirs up the sea with his power, and by his understanding he breaks up the storm. By his spirit he adorned the heavens, and his hand pierced the fleeing serpent. And this is my favorite verse here in this section. I'm in the New King James, and I like the way it puts it here. It says, "Indeed, these are the mere edges of his ways." Mere edges. This is just the little bit that we see. These are the mere edges, meaning there's so much more there than what we see. And how small a whisper we hear of him. With the thunder of his power, who can understand? So isn't that a wonderful section? It really describes some of the awesome aspects of the natural world. And after describing it, it says, this is just the beginning of what he is, of what he's done. That should be very stirring to us, to help us to understand that there's so much that we do not know. So many things God may have already done that we do not have any clue about. Do you know how he made the angelic realm? No. We know nothing about how he did that. You know when he did that? No. You know when he devised a plan to create man on the earth? No. See, we only know the mere edges of his ways, as the New King James puts it. So it's a wonderful thing to consider that the world we live in is such a marvel. And the glory of God is revealed in every aspect of it. Let's look at one verse, Zechariah 12:1. And we've got to finish up this part and move on to the next section. Zechariah 12:1, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, who stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formed the spirit of man within him. You see how much is packed into that one verse? You know, there's several places throughout Scripture, a lot in Isaiah that says, stretched forth the heavens, as though he didn't do it with a big bang. He didn't do it with an explosion. He stretched it out. What does that mean? I don't have any idea what that means. But it's a phrase that's used over and over again. I do know that. So here in Zechariah, we see he stretched forth the heavens, the universe, you could say. And then he lays the foundation of the earth, which hangs on nothing. And it has a foundation. I mean, it spins at a given rate, and the mass of it is precisely set so that it continues its yearly revolving around the sun. And then he does something even marvelous, more marvelous than that, far more. He forms the spirit of the man within him, which we know nothing about. I mean, these are glorious things. We don't have any idea how he formed the spirit of man within him. You know, when he made Adam, he took the dust of the ground, and he formed Adam out of the dust of the ground. He didn't form the cows and the giraffes and the fishes out of the dust of the ground, the way he did Adam. So he forms Adam physically, and he forms here the spirit of man within him. It's something to think about. This verse encapsulates the creation of the universe and the putting of the spirit of man in him. There's a lot of ground covered here, a lot of territory in this one verse. That is amazing. And so anyone who wants to or has the energy and the interest to study the physical universe is going to be in an endless search for the answers, because it was made that way on purpose to demonstrate his glory. Now in part 2, let's look at the glory, and I will add the trauma of his presence. Let's go over and look at, let's see here. Ezekiel 1. Ezekiel, the first chapter. As you know, in the first chapter of Ezekiel, he begins to see a vision of things supernatural. And he does see this glorious image of the throne of God being transported about. Let's read that. In verse 24, Ezekiel 1:24. When they went, that is these four creatures, or the living creatures, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings. There was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads. And when they stood, they let down their wings. Above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above, upon it. When we read this, it gives us a similar picture to what? Can you imagine what it is? What about the mercy seat? If you remember when Moses communed with God, it says, and he communed with him, and a voice spake to him from above the mercy seat. Interesting similarity. Verse 27. Now I want you to consider what's said here in verse 27 as this glory is revealed also in Revelation 1. We see similarities. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within. From the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins downward, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire, and it had the brightness round about. As the brightness is the appearance of a bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain. So it was the appearance of the brightness round about. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. This whole imagery of the likeness of a rainbow is also found in Revelation 1, where he sees that same kind of a picture. You know, John falling on his face. Same way Ezekiel falls on his face. The same way you would fall on your face if you were in that situation. This is how we respond to the trauma of being in his presence, his glory. And it's a proper response. acceptable. Interestingly, in two occasions, one in Daniel and one in Revelation 1, when they fall on their face as if dead, John says, and I fell on my face as if dead. He says, and he reached out and put his right hand on my shoulder. Think about that. What an awesome, wonderful experience it must have been. How encouraging that the Alpha and the Omega reached out and put his right hand on John's shoulder. What effect would that have? Saying, fear not. Don't be afraid, John. I'm the first, and I'm the last. Another thing he says is, I was dead, and now I'm alive forever. I have the keys to unlock death. John, without a doubt, went the rest of his days remembering that moment. How could you ever forget that he put his right hand on your shoulder? You were on your face like you were dead because of the awesomeness of the vision. And he touched you on your shoulder and told you not to be afraid. As far as I know, only one man has had that experience. But this is the normal human response to being in the presence of his glory. I think Daniel 10 had a similar response. Now let's drop down to Ezekiel 3. At the end of his vision, what was the overall effect on Ezekiel? In the 3rd chapter, in verse 14, we read, and so the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness, in the heat of my spirit. And I think some translations say, in the anger of my spirit. But the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Then I came to them of the captivity at Tel Aviv, and I dwelt there by the river Kibar, and I sat where they sat, and remained there, astonished. And some translations say stupefied and overwhelmed among them for 7 days. And how could you not be? This is from having a direct exposure to his glory in a vision. This is not the actual face-to-face glory. This is imagery that was given to Ezekiel through a vision and not direct contact. His reaction is that he's astonished and overwhelmed for 7 days. None of us have had an experience like that. Although I don't know that any of us would want to. I think it impacts the prophet or the apostle in such a way that they can do their job more effectively. They can be all in, so to speak, because of the experience. And maybe that's why many of us are not all in. Maybe that's why, I don't know. But it seems like, like with Paul being knocked off, Paul on his road to Damascus experience. And the way Peter was able to see the transfiguration, Peter, James, and John, in the transfiguration, and some of the other experiences men had, like Daniel, it kind of seals the deal that, hey, look, this vision I'm giving you, it's the evidence. I am with you. You've seen a portion of my glory in a vision, and now you're strengthened by it. And so the glory of the Lord in a personal way can strengthen the apostle or the prophet or the messenger of God in a very necessary way. We see Isaiah's reaction in Isaiah 6 when Isaiah was called to his mission. Do you remember what happened to Isaiah? When he's being called in Isaiah 6:1, called to his mission, he sees a vision. And it's a picture of the throne room of God. Let's look at it. Verse 1, Isaiah 6, verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. I love the description here. And his train filled the temple. You know how it is when they have a pomp and ceremony, when the queen is coronated, and they wear the finest clothing that they have, and everything is showy, glitz and glamour for royalty. His robe fills the temple. What do you remember about the tabernacle in the wilderness when it was first erected? On the day it was erected, what happened? The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle so that Moses was not able to go in to minister. And Solomon completed the construction of that temple. What happened during the ceremony? The glory of the Lord filled the temple so that the Levites were not able to do their service. Well, here in front of Isaiah, his train fills the temple. And above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face. And with 2 his feet. And with 2 he did fly. And one of the seraphim cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Remember what it said in Romans 1? You look around, you can understand his eternal power and Godhead because of the things that are made. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door moved. It vibrated and reverberated at the voice of him that cried. And the house was filled with smoke. And what happened to Isaiah? Woe is me, I'm going to die, because I'm a man of unclean lips. I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And I'm going to die because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Natural response. Some fell on their face as if dead. Ezekiel goes back to the river, stupefied, overwhelmed. Isaiah says, woe is me, I'm undone. It's a way of saying, I'm all done. I'm finished, is what he's saying. Because I've seen the King. So we see it's kind of traumatizing to be in the presence of the glory of the Lord as a human. In this tabernacle, in this tent. We're not able to do it. Even in a vision. This is Isaiah in a vision, like Ezekiel was only in a vision. And it's overwhelming. And so the glory of the Lord is far beyond our capacity to be exposed to. All right, it looks like we better drop down part 3. Someone have a comment? Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah, we can hear you, Al.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Rich Daniels had a problem. I had to mute him.
Yeah.
He had problems last week with his mic.
Okay. You can read for yourself the transfiguration in Matthew 17, where it says, and they fell on their face, and they were sore afraid when the cloud enveloped them. You know, the response of Peter, James, and John, very similar to so many others that were in the very presence of his glory. Although it's still just a vision. Remember, of course, that Moses asked, please let me see your glory. And his response was, no, you can't do that and live. But I'll put you in the cleft of the rock, and when I walk by, I'll hold my hand up. And then you'll be able to see the back. I'll take my hand away. And we know what happened. Moses' face was glowing afterwards, and people were afraid of him. They didn't want, put the hood on. Put the hood on. This is scary. It's scaring me here. Well, even the very reflection of God's glory glowing off Moses, you know, it was a little too much for them. All right, let's see. You can read for yourself the fact that in Isaiah 40 verses 4 and 5 it says, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. And we know that that is an end-time prophecy, and that the glory of the Lord shall be revealed on another level altogether, not just in looking in the earth or at the cosmos, but at the very return of Christ himself, that whole other level of glory, which will be undeniable to the nations. And you can read that in several places. Revelation 1 says, and every eye shall see him as he is returning. Revelation 19 is a fuller description of him riding on a white horse, and he is called faithful and true. So all that with his eyes like a flame of fire and all the rest of the glory of his return. Now let's look at the last section here, the glory of Jesus Christ on the earth as a human and his intention to glorify men. Let's look at John 1, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, and verse 14. John 1:14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, glory as the only begotten of the Father, filled with graciousness and truth. So that's a different kind of glory altogether, isn't it? The only begotten of the Father. What is it saying here? I think the glory that's being spoken of here, his graciousness and his truth, the glory of how he interacted with the common folk. How did he interact with graciousness with a leper? Or with the man who was at the pool of Siloam and he couldn't reach the water? Or how about his graciousness towards the Samaritan woman at the well? It was nothing like the religious leaders of his day. They were the opposite, condemning, wanting to have power over others for their own gain, for personal gain, wanting the chief seats to be looked up to for vainglory. But this man was filled with graciousness and truth. It says, and that was his glory, that he was the only begotten of the Father. But everything he did was a reflection of how the Father is. You were seeing the glory of the Father himself in his Son. The Father is gracious, full of truth. And that's how our Savior dealt with the humans, except for the self-righteous, condemning, hateful. Outside of that, he was gracious. So he was a perfect representation of his Father. You can see the contrast of that in Matthew 23 when he is not so gracious to those who needed to be corrected. That's right. But when the centurion came and said, "My child is dying. If you'll just say the word, I know it's enough." He was very gracious to that man. So it was a glorious thing. It says here in John 1:14, we beheld his glory in how he treated people with graciousness and in how he never compromised with what was true. And that is a glorious thing because it was a perfect representation of our Father. Let's look now at John 12. I can see we're going to run out of time here real quick. Now let's move down to Hebrews 2:10. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10. I want to finish up here with his intentions are for the glorification of humankind. So let's look at Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 10. For it was fitting for him, it was appropriate for him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things. Well, that's a this verse has a lot. We can go off on an awful lot of tangents with this verse. And by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Now, what do you think of that verse? It's too much there, isn't it? But the fact is, he makes the statement, it's going to bring many sons to glory. And I think the church has always referred to that as part of the very essence of the gospel. It's part of the very the essence of why humans were created, to be brought into glory. And so we set our hope on that. We set our vision on that. We look to that as the ultimate reward, so to speak. And that's why he reveals it to us. He wants us to think about those things, that he's bringing many sons to glory. If he didn't, I think he would not say it. He didn't want us to think about it. I'm going to skip a lot of this material. We have in Colossians 1, 26 through 28, we see that there's a mystery. We're going to skip over that. A mystery that's been hidden from ages and from generations, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory, which really means the hope of being glorified. Because with Christ in you, we have that essence of the divine spark, so to speak, which plants within our spirit that future hope of being glorified. And I believe that's what that verse means. And in Colossians 3, verse 4, you can skip over that one. You also appear with him in glory, being glorified. I was talking with my wife.
Did we just lose him?
He muted himself.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Did I mute myself?
Yeah.
Said you were talking to your wife.
You were talking to your wife. It's the last thing we heard.
Okay, yeah, I was talking to my wife, and you know how when you have a funeral, they give out the little bifold with the man's image on, a picture of the person who died, and then a little Bible verse and that kind of thing. And I was talking with Charlene about that, and we were going back and forth. But well, what would you like to have on yours? And what verse do you think you would like to have? So, it's kind of a tough thing, to think about, and I'm kind of torn between two different ones. And they both have to do with the topic of discussion here. The first one is Psalm 73:24. And this is a psalm about fretting over the prosperity of the wicked and how difficult it is when things aren't going well in your life. Things are not smooth and easy and prosperous, but you see the wicked prospering. And the psalmist here says, I almost slipped. I think somewhere early in the chapter in verse 2 or so. He says, look, and I almost slipped. I almost lost my footing. I almost fell away. I almost turned away. It's a very, very hard thing. Then you go down and he says, and then I understood clearly what the reality of it is when I went into the sanctuary. Then dropping down to verse 24, he says, and this is one of the ones I think I would maybe consider having on my funeral. And thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterwards receive me to glory. Isn't that beautiful? Kind of a summation of the man of God life, isn't it? I mean, isn't this what we hope would be true about us? We hope that we will be guided by his counsel and afterwards received into glory. And the competing one with that is Psalm 17. Which also is very beautiful. Verse 15. This is Psalm 17 and 15. I said to Charlene, it's kind of a toss-up between these two. But I think every one of you should think about, what would I like to have on that little card that gets handed out when people walk into the funeral home. They're about to greet the family, and they're going to see one verse that maybe you selected before you died, because you can still do that. You haven't breathed your last yet. Psalm 17:15, but as for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness, and I will be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness and your glory. That's what that means. When I awake in the likeness of your glory. So I think you should all consider that. Finding something that can be written. I gave Charlene those two. And I love both of them. They're both so positive and so encouraging and so hopeful, and we need to have that. Now I will skip over this Isaiah 60:1 and 2. This is a millennial passage talking about the glory of the Lord having been risen upon you, and his glory shall be seen upon you. It's very difficult for me to figure out, is this talking about the nation of Israel in the millennial period, or is it talking about resurrected saints? I don't know. That's left up to your own opinion. In any case, whichever it is, this is some beautiful, beautiful stuff that we need to meditate on, think about. Let me say this, meditating on his glory is not just a fantasy. It's not just something to entertain us. It's to strengthen our appreciation and our respect and our awe of his power and his plans, of the things he has done, the things he will do. It's to strengthen our vision. It's for us to keep perspective in difficult times. Meditating on this keeps us looking forward to being glorified with him. And since these things are true, we can talk about it. We can be joyful. And we can accept the fact God tells us the truth about his glory and about our glorification. We see so many places, such as Matthew 13:43, where it says, we shall shine like the sun. Daniel 12:3, they shall shine as the sun. Philippians 3:21 says, and our mortal bodies will be made like unto his glorious body. And on, there are many places we can see that his intention is to glorify us. Let me ask you this. He's going to glorify you. Do you, in your life, glorify him? Let's look at Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 23. Because this is one of the places where we are specifically told and instructed to glory, that we ourselves are to glory in knowing him. Not in the things that we produce, but in knowing him. Let's read this. Jeremiah 9:23. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. And all people do that. Glory in your wisdom, you'll get a promotion at work. To glory in your wisdom, you'll get published, and you'll get peer reviewed and all of this. Neither let the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches. See, this is what we're all prone to, right? Our might, our wisdom, our riches. This is all self-glorification. This is just natural. This is how people puff themselves up. Of course, then they die. But let him that glories glory in this. And this is what we're told to do. And I don't know if we do this enough. But he understands and he knows me. Do you understand and know him? If you do, you glory in that? You're told to. We're told to glory in that. That I am the Lord which exercise loving kindness. So if you're going to glory in that you know him, glory in that you know about his loving kindness. And that you know something, even if it's a little bit, about his judgment and his righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. If you know him, you delight in those things. He says he does. If you understand and know him, our instruction here is to glory in it. Now, how do you do that? Any ideas? How are you going to glory in understanding and knowing that he exercises loving kindness? I think you need to talk about it. I don't think we talk enough about it. I suppose to maybe get the ball rolling, that's what you need to do. We're supposed to glory in it. All right. We're past 10 o'clock. Let's go. Let's close with Psalm 24. This is very poetic, this section here. We're in Psalm 24, verse 7. It's the way it's put together is question and answer, question and answer. It's very nice concerning glory. Psalm 24, verse 7. Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be ye lifted up, you everlasting doors. The King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? Lord, strong, mighty, Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates, even lift them up, you everlasting doors. King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? Lord of hosts. He's the King of glory. Selah. Well, that's what I finished with tonight, that little section there. Very nice to read that. Of course, you know, being from the Psalms, it's going to have that special flavor, and I love the way it goes back and forth with the question and the answer. It's just beautifully put. There's so much more material on this topic, so much more that can be said. And I had to remove a lot. Like I said, this original study went 5 weeks in our small group, so I had to cut a lot of things out of it. But if you should choose to on your own look more deeply into this topic, I'd be glad to email you the full package of notes that I have. And then, of course, you develop all your own as well. But I really thoroughly enjoyed the 5 weeks that we put into that. And I hope that, that what little bit was given in this hour was good for you. So if anyone wanted to comment or question at this time, that'd be good.
Okay, there was a question earlier stated in the chat room to me about the camera. There is a limit of 6 cameras, so only 6 people can have their cameras at one time. So you can pop on your camera, ask your question, and then pop out or whatever. But the question did come up, how many people can be on the camera at once, and the limit is 6. So you don't have to everyone leave, but so if anyone has any questions, holler.
Or comments, or if you want to add something, whatever. It's a pretty big topic, and I'll ask a question then. When he told Moses, "You cannot see me and live," why was that? Was it because the intensity of his brightness will kill you? Was it because the presence of such holiness and purity would be too overwhelming and you would die from that? What is the cause of not being able to see him and live? I don't know the answer to that. But it's kind of an interesting thing that we can only see him in a vision and not in the face-to-face.
I think
Anybody have a comment or a question about any part of the study? No? Okay.
I'll get the ball rolling here. You had mentioned the glory will shine and be with Israel. If you go in Ezekiel 40 through 48, talks about the millennial temple and the Shekinah glory that will come to it and sit in the most holy place. It goes into great detail about the Shekinah glory coming through the east gate, going past the altar and into the most holy place. So that might be an answer to your question.
So you think that matches up with Isaiah 60?
I think so. Because the Shekinah glory will be with Israel. The Shekinah glory will be on Israel, literally.
The nation,
and it's a promise.
Are you talking about the nation, the city of Jerusalem, the nation of Israel, the temple, what?
The nation of Israel. The nation of Israel will be around that millennial temple. There's a on TempleMount.org, there's a really good Google 3D explanation of the temple, the layout, and it goes through all the biblical terms and shows in detail how the temple will be built, how it's constructed, how the people will come and go in and out of it, where the Shekinah glory will come in, where King David will be standing, sitting, residing, how the nations will all be around it. It really, really, it was on TempleMount.org. It was an excellent, excellent layout. And they go verse by verse through from chapter 40 all the way to 48.
Hmm.
Well, hey, Alan. It's Chris DeWeese. How you doing?
Oh, hey, Chris.
Hey. I think it's Don's talking about the Shekinah glory, and that's what the Israelites saw. You know, the cloud of fire, and then the cloud of smoke, and the pillar of fire. And I think the song, you know, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I think that that's probably referencing that, you know, that glory there, that, you know, right about when the Lord comes back to take care of business. And I just, when you said that and sort of talking about it, what came to me was, blessed are those who believe and do not see, because the people who went out of the wilderness and they saw all those wonderful miracles, and they still were willing to turn around and go back and become slaves. And here we are, you know, humble people lost in the wilderness, having a Bible study on the Sabbath when most of the world has no idea what that is. So I would say, you know, that maybe we should think about that a little bit. But the Shekinah glory, I think, is, you know, pray for the day when we do get to see that, when we do get to see Yeshua coming back in his glory, surrounded by legions of angels. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good.
Hi, this is Mike. Yeah,
Hey,
and
Mike.
I have a comment. It's a fairly simple equation. If you look at, for example, at the sun shines, it generates the light, and then the moon reflects that light.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the glory of the sun is reflected by the moon. And then if you think about the people on earth that are seeing the light of the moon, and then you know, their light is being reflected off to each other, you know, because we can see each other in the light of the moon, that light is passed on. It just keeps on being reflected. So as we reflect God's glory, you know, to others, then that lights them up, and you can kind of see that sometimes, where if you're reflecting the glory of God, the other person begins to have a little bit of a sunbeam or a moonbeam, you know, reflecting off of them also. and it just keeps reflecting. So that's the thing about the glory, is that if we reflect the nature of Christ, you know, the love, you know, the kindness, the mercy towards one another, that continues to reflect.
Yes. That very thing you're talking about, Mike, I passed over a lot of those parts. There's a section in 2 Corinthians where it talks about going from glory to glory. And I think that's the very thing you're talking about there, that we increase in our glory. But you're so right about that. You're so right about that. It's why he said the glory as of the only begotten of the Father. In John 1:14, when he said that's that glory, that was that graciousness and the unwillingness to compromise what's true and right. And that glory was from the Father through his Son to us, like you said, that it shines on us and goes other places as a result.
And then we see that glory reflected back off of others in the process, because it's from glory to glory. It's a reflection of the nature of God being passed one to another.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, let me ask you this. In Jeremiah 9, where it says, let not a man glory in his riches or his wisdom, but let him glory in this, that he knows me, that, let me quote it here. But that he knows me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, righteousness in the earth. These are the things I delight in. What are your thoughts on us glorying in that? Because he says here, this is the things you should glory in. How can we glory in that better than we have?
My thought is that anybody reflecting on, glorying in themselves, it's all in their own mind. Like a man can be anything he wants in his own mind. It doesn't mean it's reality. And so I think it's a little bit of an ironic statement that, there's no such thing as a wise man glorying in his own wisdom, because it doesn't exist. It's all in his own mind. In other words, that's the vision, that's the fantasy. The only light that's on the earth comes from the sun. Yep. And now if the moon thinks it's really bright, well, where did it get its brightness?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it's an irony here, is that, it'd be like if the moon glories in his own brightness. Well, like, where did you get your brightness from? There is no fusion happening at your core. The only brightness the moon has is the reflection from the sun. That's the same with people. No matter what, who created us, who gave us everything we have, all we can do is reflect God's glory. We have no glory of our own. It's all in our own mind if we think we do.
And we're told here about the glory in it, that we know him, and that we understand his loving kindness and judgment and righteousness.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that I've done well at that. I don't know about.
But the fact is there is no glory except what comes from God. In other words, all we can do, we're like the moon, all we can do is reflect what's been given to us. We cannot generate, we are not God. We cannot generate any glory of ourselves. All we are is in fact, we're a reflection of a reflection because we're a reflection of our parents. You know, what child could say that he created himself? A child has his intelligence, a child has his training, he has everything because of what his parents did and those around him gave him. You know,
Right.
There is no child that's self-generating.
Right.
And that's the same with us as people. None of us is self-generating. None of us generate glory. All we can do is reflect the glory that's been passed on to us.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. Are there any other comments or questions?
Mark, you've been pretty quiet. Got to pick on him. And Jerry, you've been pretty quiet too.
I'm just taking it all in. I'm the student tonight. I really appreciated what the study in itself, and then Mike's comments at the end there were I thought pretty profound. I never heard that before. Everything was excellent. I appreciate it very much.
Well, all right then. I want to thank everybody for being tuned in tonight. Thank you, Don, for having me.
Enjoyed having you.
And hopefully we'll see you again sometime.
Yeah, it would be nice. See you in person. So, Paul and Lorraine are waving hello.
Bye,
All right.
everybody. Have a good evening.
All righty. Well, that does conclude the official portion of our program. I'm going to stop the recording.